Good morning and welcome to the Caregiver Teleconnection. My name is Glenda Rogers and I'm going to be your facilitator for today's call. Today we have one of our frequent presenters with us, and that's Dr. Tam Cummings. She's going to be talking about coping with caregiver grief. But before she starts her presentation and I introduce you to her, let me ask Adrian Martinez with Vitas Healthcare, our sponsor for the call today, to tell us a little bit about Vitas. Adrian, please go ahead.
Thank you so much. Good morning, everyone. If you're taking care of a family member or loved one who faces the challenges of an advanced illness, messages about holiday cheer can often feel hollow or off target. In addition to all of the normal stresses of the holidays, from shopping and cooking to travel and family visits, you're likely to be feeling the additional burdens of your loved one's illness. What happens if he or she takes a turn for the worse during the holidays? What if symptoms develop in the middle of the night or on a weekend when you know that contacting your physician or a healthcare provider might be difficult or next to impossible? The bright spot in all of the holiday stress is the knowledge that hospice care, which is compassionate, comfort-focused care for patients with advanced illness, never takes a holiday at Vitas Healthcare. Our teams of specially trained hospice nurses, aides, physicians, social workers, chaplains, and bereavement specialists are always available after normal business hours, on weekends, and on holidays. Your regular team members and our telecare specialists are always available to take your phone calls, calm your anxious nerves, offer advice and suggestions, and answer your questions. If necessary, they can send someone to visit you and your loved at home, your nursing home, or assisted living community to manage troubling symptoms, ease pain, resolve crises, and keep you where you prefer to be. We support our family members and caregivers however we can, whether ordering a new medication, listening to your concerns, saying a prayer, planning a memorial service, or dispatching a trained team member to the bedside to make sure your loved one is comfortable and able to remain at home or in your preferred setting. Holidays are important family times, and our care team surrounds you and your family with extra layers of support so that you can embrace quality of life near the end of life at this very special time of the year. If you need help caring for a loved one who has been diagnosed with an advanced illness, call Vitas Healthcare at 800-723-3233 or visit vitas.com for information and support from the nation's leading provider of end of life care. We're available 24/7, even during the holidays.
Thank you, Adrian, and thank you, Vitas, for sponsoring this call today. If Vitas is not in your service area, you can always call 211 and ask for a local hospice provider for your area, and they will be able to offer you services also. So let's get started with our session today. As I said, it's coping with caregiver grief. It's a difficult subject, but one that we do need to talk about. Let me tell you a little bit about Dr. Tam Cummings. She founded her company in 2009 with a mission to inspire, educate, and empower dementia caregivers. Now her professional gerontological practice in the Texas Hill Country is recognized as one of the leading educators of dementia caregivers and program design for the dementia care nationally. Tam, welcome to the call today.
Thank you, Glenda, and thank you, Vitas, and thank you, WellMed Charitable. And you're right, this is a tough subject. In fact, when Glenda realized this is what we were doing and what the day was, she sent me a message and said, "Are you sure? I mean, is this right? Should we be doing this?" And I told her, "Trust me, we're going to end up hopefully in a very positive area." So to start with today, make sure my little clicker's on. Let's start the way we do a lot of these, with a breathing exercise. This is one of the things that will help bring your blood pressure down. This is the breathing technique we use to reach meditative or prayer state, that is breathing at 8 respirations per minute. Meditation, we know, is the best exercise for our brain. It's the best health thing we can do for our brain as we age. It doesn't work on our loved ones because their brains are dying. But for you and I, this is the best exercise. And as we go through the topic today, it will be challenging. It can bring up a lot of emotions. So it's important that we all just breathe. And if your loved one is in a community already, do this breathing technique before you get out of your car and go in to visit them. when you leave and get back into your car, before you ever leave the parking lot, do the breathing again to give you a way to center yourself before your visits and after your visits. So Glenda, the breath is, we breathe in to the count of 4, hold for the count of 2, and we breathe out to the count of 6. The out breath needs to be longer than the in breath in order to slow our respiration down. So today we're going to start with 3 breaths, and I will lead the counting. So put your feet on the floor, hands up in your lap. You can shut your eyes if you want to, and everybody take a deep breath in, 2, 3, 4, hold, hold, breathe out, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Deep breath in, 2, 3, 4, hold, hold, breathe out, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Deep breath in, 2, 3, 4, hold, hold, breathe out, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That takes only a few seconds to do. It really does help get you centered. And in these moments, as we go through this, and as you go through your day, remember to stop and do a few breaths for yourself, because we really do want you to be the survivor of the disease. So Glenda, here we go. I saw this and thought this was really quite poignant. And I had never looked at grief before this way, as being the actual last act of love that we can give someone. And Glenda, you and I have both lost spouses, parents, grandparents, friends. Doesn't this ring true?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely rings true.
I mean, you think about, how will I be remembered? And to be remembered, even in the act of grief, I think speaks of such a deep love. So as we start today, I'm probably going to get tearful, so just bear with me. Grief is something that affects us all. The stages of grief were written by Dr. Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, and a graduate student named David Kessler. And if you look at the book, at the very top of it, it says, Dr. Elizabeth Kubler-Ross. And at the bottom of it, in tiny little letters, it says, and David Kessler, her graduate student. David owns a website called grief.com, and he is an expert in grieving, in end of life, and in the process of loss. And one of the things that is most confused about the stages of grief from Dr. Kubler-Ross and David Kessler is that people think this is about death. And it's not about death, it's about loss. You and I go through the stages of grief over loss, any loss. It could be the loss of a job, the loss of a friendship, the loss of a marriage, the loss of a loved one. So it, for me, and I do think at times this is real, especially when I'm running late, I go through the stages of grief if I get stuck at a red light. I start with no, in total denial. And then I'm so angry at the person in front of me who obviously doesn't understand the rules of driving and could have easily gotten through that light. And then I begin to realize the length of the light, and I start bargaining. Oh God, if you'll just please let this light eventually turn green, I'll be a better person, I'll be a better driver. And then I get depressed because these lights in Austin, these lights in New York, these lights all over the country are forever. And I get very, very depressed. And then right when I reach the point of acceptance, that this is just where I'm supposed to be in this moment, the light turned green, I take off again, I get the next red light, and I go through the whole thing again. So the stages of grief are something that you and I experience, not just in death, but actually we experience them throughout our lives and throughout situations where loss occurs. Now, one of the big things is denial. And let me preface that by saying, Belinda, that everybody grieves at their own rate, at their own pace, in their own way. And they do not necessarily follow these stages, nor does every person go through all of these stages. And for family caregivers of people with dementia, that can be especially true because there is so much grief that goes on for so long that at death, you truly may have reached acceptance because you've already gone through all the other things. Now, one of the things that I hear from families a lot, and they're usually very, very annoyed about it, and I hear from professional caregivers a lot, and they're really, really annoyed about it, is that this family member is in denial. And they mean this in a couple of ways. They mean that they're in denial of recognizing that the person has dementia, that they're in denial of accepting the responsibility for the person who has dementia, that they're in denial that this terrible thing is going on around them. And I think, Glenda, what we don't realize is denial is the brain's way of coping with something that is so overwhelming to it that it actually needs time to process the information. So it's not so much denial in that this is a terrible, bad person. I usually view denial as they simply don't understand what's happening to their loved one. They don't understand they won't look sick until they lose a pound of brain tissue. They simply don't understand how the diseases of dementia work. But as I was researching this, because this is the first time I've done this presentation, so Glenda's going to bear with me, is that denial means the brain needs time to process the information. One of the ways I think about an easier way for us to accept denial is to get a phone call telling us that a loved one just died suddenly.
Yeah.
And for most of us, our immediate response to answering the phone and getting that information is no. Our automatic response is no. Our brain says, no, that could not have happened. That is simply not real. And so in those moments of quick death, we see denial very clearly. In the long goodbye that family caregivers of people with dementia go through, it is a much longer process because the dementias are so subtle and so slow that it literally can take a person in the family quite a while to realize there's actually truly something wrong. And a big part of that is the brain's inability to just accept that this person who looks so healthy is actually not healthy at all. They're in fact dying. Anger. Glenda had to meet with families where I made sure, because you could just feel the anger coming off of this adult child, and he was a big adult child. I made sure that during the meeting, I was at the other end of the conference table and closest one out the door. Because the people between me and him were his dad, and I felt like I was going to be the target because I frequently have to give people very difficult information. And I also, early in my career, I would see people sitting in the audience like this, and they just were glaring at me, and it would really freak me out that I was seeing people so angry. And then I realized they weren't angry at me. They were angry at their loss. They were angry that this disease was taking away their mother. They were angry because their children would not have a grandmother. That the anger wasn't at me, the anger was at the loss. I see people bargaining, and the bargaining is not what I think we think people would be. We're not bargaining that, oh, please be healed. What I find in dementia care is that the bargaining is, please, Lord, couldn't you just take them tonight? Couldn't they just go to sleep tonight and this be over? And that's a much different bargaining than, Lord, if you'll fix this person, I'll be a better person and I'll give all my money to the church. The bargaining is more of a, I see this loss in my loved one. They're a shell of who they were. They would hate to know this was happening. Please, can't they just have it over tonight? And the thing that I want you to realize today as you listen is that's normal. That is a normal human thought, especially for family caregivers of people with dementia, as you watch your person stolen from you, literally a brain cell at a time. And so it is normal that you think that and that you feel that. Depression. Glenda, how many depressed caregivers have you and I met?
More than we could count.
All of them.
Yeah.
First of all, we're in the age of people most likely to suffer depression, because at this point, how many funerals have you been to? You've buried parents and grandparents. You may have buried children. You may have buried spouses. There has been loss. The body doesn't work the way it used to. I don't know how many people on this call sprang out of bed this morning. I can tell you I'm not a leaper anymore. I've got joints that have gelled in the night. It takes me a few moments to get moving. There is a natural depression that can begin to happen at this age, but we're least likely to go talk to our doctors about it, and it's something treatable. And the depression, again, is over the loss of our body's ability, the fear that when we walked in that room and we didn't remember what we went in there for, that was actually us getting dementia, and in reality, it's not. It's just normal brain function. Depression at where we are in life, depression at our loved one being sick, depression about the finances that are involved. That's always a concern. But again, something that is treatable. And then we hope that a family member comes to acceptance. We hope that you reach a point with your loved one in the stages of grief where you are at a place of peace. And for some of you, that will come early. Glenda, there's a family that I called one time, and this would have been in 2005. And I called the family and said, if you want to see your husband, if his children want to tell him goodbye, you need to come this weekend. He is at that final moment. And the wife said, my husband died 8 years ago. Please notify the funeral home. And I was shocked and I was horrified. And I thought, how cold, how callous. And now, years later, I begin to realize that for some people, their pain is so great that they're not able to react in a way that you and I might find to be a bit different than how other people we know might act. I've known families on the opposite end who come and sit with their loved one until the very, very end and are there with them when they die. And so you see very different ways that we grieve, different ways that we hopefully reach acceptance and understand a little bit better about the stages of grief. They're about our loss. Now, for family members, especially for spouses, there are great losses. There is your loss of your identity as a couple, your identity as a spouse. And if your loved one was somebody who was well known or renowned or known very well or beloved in the family, it can be especially difficult because your identity may have been wrapped up in who that person was. And I have seen people who are very angry because their spouse is a nationally known person, and now that person's illness is affecting their identity and their livelihood and where they want to live. And I've seen great anger at the spouse from their other spouse as for being sick. There is typically an increase in emotional intensity and feelings of rawness. A lot of questions about uncertainty about the future. A worry that your loved one is going to outlive their money, outlive everything, leave you destitute. Confusion about what the disease is doing, what's happening, what happens next. A friend of mine asked me the other day, I can take it, just tell me what is going to happen next. And I said, it just gets worse. Yeah. That's the best way I can help you understand it. Is you look at your staging tool. These are the behaviors we will expect, but understand that it gets worse. And the pain you feel now can get even worse as that continues. You have feelings of aloneness. For some people, this may be the first time in their life, Glenda, that they've been alone. We certainly know families that went directly from their parents' home into a marriage and children and have been in this marriage for 60 years, 30 years. 40 years, 50 years, and suddenly they're alone. And feelings of anger. There can be great anger, especially if the family loved one believes that the person with dementia did something that caused the dementia. There can, so maybe they were a smoker. Maybe they did something else that caused this. They were an alcoholic. And so there can be all kinds of feelings. And then understand that grief gives us a real physiological feeling. It feels like great bitterness and sadness, but it also can make our chest hurt. It can make our stomach hurt. It can make our heart hurt. It can make us hurt all over in physical ways that we just didn't understand. So there are things that we never say to people that are grieving. And Glenda, you and I hear these all the time because of dementia. We hear a lot of these constantly. We hear, well, she lived a long life. We hear that a lot, and that is especially true if your loved one is above the age of 90. You are not going to get as much grief support as you would if your loved one was in their 70s. And so my response to that is she may have lived a long life, but that's still the only mother I have. So be prepared that people say that. And they say that in the best, they have the best intentions, don't they, Glenda?
Oh,
They're
absolutely.
trying, but they say things that actually make it worse. He is in a better place. And your feeling may be, no, the better place was right here next to me. She brought this on herself. Now, you need to stay away from people who say stuff like that. They're just cruel. There's a reason for everything. Yeah, you know, that may be true, Glenda, but that's not what I need to hear. Something families need to understand is about 6 weeks after your loved one has passed, we need you to be over it. We're done now, Glenda. This makes us uncomfortable. We need to move on. And so we say things like, well, it's been 6 weeks. It's time to move on. And those things are not real for you. This grief process takes at least a decade. People who've lost children, whether they're children or adult children, I could talk to them when they're 102 and say, tell me about your children, and they will tell me about their child that died, because that grief lasts forever. And people thinking they're being positive say you can have another child. That won't replace the one that's there, that was there. God wanted this person to be with them. That hurts people because it makes God bad. It makes what you see as a higher power a negative thing, and it doesn't help. I know how you feel. Glenda, what's your response to I know how you feel?
You can't possibly know how I feel. You
Yeah.
haven't been in my shoes.
Yeah. And then she came here to do, and it was her time to go, and then be strong. And I think that be strong, they're trying to be positive, but it's not helpful. There's nothing in this list that is helpful. The 10 best things to say is, I am so sorry for your loss. I wish I had the right words. Just know that I care. Glenda's line, I don't know how you feel, but I'm here to help you in any way I can.
Yeah.
I'll keep you in my thoughts and in my prayers. My favorite memory. You know what, Glenda, one of the greatest things that we do in grief, and it's painful and we don't realize this, is we stop saying that person's name. And if it is a child that has died and we stop saying their name, the parents think, well, they didn't love my child. No one will say their name. And the same thing happens with us as adults. I don't say mama's name because it makes my sister cry. And I think, oh, look at her. She doesn't miss mother. And she thinks, well, I don't ever say mother's name, so I don't care. And the reality is we're both hurting and we need to say their name. A lady called me yesterday and she was telling me about, for some reason, it had suddenly come into her mind just then, that a friend of ours 18 years ago had her son die in a car accident. And she and I talked about, do you ever say his name? Do you say his name around her? And she said, no, I don't. I said, well, why don't you write a card and tell her that you are thinking about him today and use his name and tell her a memory of him. And it will be the greatest present she will get this year. So one of the things we do is we don't say the person's name, because I'm afraid if I say his name, you're going to start crying, Glenda, and then what will I do? And the reality is you need to hear that name. We all need to hear that name. I am just a phone call away. That is an important thing, because it says I'm going to be here to support you. Sometimes we don't have anything to do but hug someone. And that's been really scary, Glenda, because I could hug you and give you something that could then make you really sick or kill you. But when we've hugged people, we've hugged with our mask on, I've hugged with my head away, and I've hugged holding my breath, and then I've immediately backed up. But it's helpful. Saying things that I'm here for you. I'm here for you. I'm here for you. I'm here for you. And then sometimes there's just the silence of being with a person is very, very powerful. It's important that you continue your spirituality, whatever your spirituality is, because it's going to help you in your grieving. It will help you in your quality of life. It will help you to feel better. Those familiar spiritual rituals will make you view your grief in a different way. It will give you another way to relieve your grief and another way to look at your grief. For those of you who are being a friend for someone right now, you gotta be a tough friend. And this is hard. It's hard to accept intense emotions without saying it's okay, it's okay. Because Glenda, the first thing you and I want to do is fix it. The problem is it's not okay. So we have to tuck those words back in and simply listen and learn to be comfortable with silences, learn to be comfortable with crying. And remember, grief tears are different than I stub my toe tears. Grief tears actually remove toxins from the brain that are produced as we grieve. So it's important that we're comfortable with a person crying and knowing that there's nothing we can do other than be there. And that is so, so important. Buy a stamp, send a card, send a letter, use the person's name. We know that these have great emotional value because it gives me something to hold on to. It's not a text, it's not a phone call, it's your actual writing, and I can hold on to it. And unlike everybody else, you said my loved one's name, which means to me, you must have really cared. And understand you don't have all the answers. None of us do. We're all doing the best we can at the time with what we knew. One of the things we know about people in deep grief, Glenda, is I come to you and I go, what do you need me to do? The reality is you're in deep grief. You don't even know how you're going to get to tonight. So don't ask, do. Take food over. People bring food when, Glenda?
When
Mama just died. When do they bring that food?
Right.
And now how much food do I have? I got enough for Cox's army, as my grandmother would say.
Yeah.
And what about next week when there is no food? And what about next month? I'm still grieving. So bring food. Stop by for a visit. Stop into the lawn. Take the trash out for them. Do their grocery shopping. Wash their car. There are 1,000 things you can do to help somebody. One of the stories I know that a family said meant most to them was on the day of the funeral, their friend showed up and said, I'm here to get the kids ready. And he made sure that the kids were dressed, that their shoes were clean, that their suits were pressed, and that the kids were ready. Because he knew that's what they needed that day. That's what he could do. And it's those things that get us through. And this is now the third time I've said this. Don't be afraid of the silence. Sometimes all I can do to support you, and sometimes all you can do to support me, is just be there. Just be there. And that in and of itself is an important part of the grieving process. So Glenda, feet flat on the floor, hands up in your lap. Let's all take a deep breath. Everybody, deep breath in, 2, 3, 4, hold, hold, breathe out, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Remember that grief is a powerful moment, and it is a moment that goes on for a while, and it comes in great intensity at times, and at other times it wanes. And there's moments where you wake up and you may go half a day before you realize you're in grief, and that then causes some guilt to happen and to feel that, but that's normal. That's a normal thing. And in time, you'll reach a moment where you can say their name without a tear coming to your eye or a crack coming to your throat. Grief after the death of your loved one can cause a lot of different things to happen. You may feel numb. You may feel angry. You may have regrets because you didn't finish a conversation. You didn't repair a relationship. It is normal that you feel worse, physically ill following the death of a loved one. You may even have physical reactions. Your body may have strange sensations, and it's enough, Glenda, to where you actually go to the doctor, and the doctor will have difficulty finding a causation of why you feel all these different things unless the doctor understands that you're in grief. You may have outbursts. Your husband brings you a cup of coffee and you chop his head off because the coffee cup was wrong. It wasn't really the coffee cup, it's grief. You may have surprises and forgetfulness where you find yourself going to call your loved one, or you find yourself driving over there because that's what you would have done normally. You may see reoccurring pictures in your mind, and you may have dreams of your loved one. There are series of being able to be connected with your loved one after death in dreams. And the theories are that just before I go to sleep, Glenda, in that final moment, I need to focus my thoughts on that loved one and ask them to come to me in a dream. And that makes it more likely that I will dream about them. And so that is something that is seen and done around the world. If you're grieving and your loved one has died, a new way of counting time begins for you, and it becomes the first Christmas, the first Hanukkah, the second Valentine's, the fourth Father's Day, the seventh Thanksgiving, because the reality of grieving for a person that you loved, a spouse or a parent that you loved, is that it's actually a decade, at least a decade. Now, if it is a child, whether it was a child or an adult child, that, Glenda, is a grief that a person carries with them for a lifetime. And that is normal. So I told you there was good stuff. I told you that after we did this, we would try to help everybody get a little bit better prepared for grief or taken care of. So, Glenda, have you seen any of these people around?
I could be one of those people, depending on the day.
I have certainly been those people, and that was before COVID. So I want to talk to you now about self-compassion. Compassion is something that is deeply rooted in our primitive brain, and it comes from when we lived in families and in tribes, because what happened to you directly impacted me and the rest of us. And compassion is something that you and I feel when we see someone who we believe is suffering. It's not empathy. Empathy is something where you and I try to put ourselves in someone else's shoes. Compassion is when it actually involves the desire to help another. It is very deeply rooted in us. It is something that we as humans feel. And it causes really neat things to happen in the brain when you feel compassion. It releases the bonding hormone. It lights up areas of the brain that light up when you cause pleasure to others, when you have empathy, when you do caregiving. And these areas of the brain seem to trigger and light up only when you do those things. You feel better because you literally release happy hormones into your brain, which tells you you feel better. Now, self-compassion is tough because it is treating yourself with the same compassion that you give to others, including total strangers. So you walk up to a total stranger and help them, but you have, for most of us, a much harder time helping ourselves. We don't like compassion because it can make people actually feel needy, weak. It really goes against U.S. core feelings of self-reliance. It really, really goes against Texas feelings of self-reliance. We're the Texans. We're ahead of everybody. It can make people not feel worthy. It can actually make people feel physically ill. It can make them feel different. And the reason for that is that you and I, as adults, are much more accustomed to hearing self-criticizing and to hearing a voice in our head that has been there for a long, long time telling us that we're really not worthy, we're really not good. And then some people have trouble with regular compassion of any kind. They're suspicious of other people. What is it that you're going to get from me? Why are you being nice to me? No one's been nice to me. You must be up to something. It can actually make their chest hurt. It can make them have acute anxiety. And it frightens some people who have had their emotions on such lockdown. They keep their emotions so tight. It frightens them when people show them compassion, when people show them kindness, because those feelings feel foreign to them. It makes them uncomfortable. Some people don't recognize the need for self-compassion. What they see of themselves, or what you and I see of that person, can be completely different than what they feel. And Glenda, you and I see that with family caregivers all the time. They will tell us, we're doing great, we're paddling as hard as we can, meaning that on top of the water, the duck looks fine, but underneath, paddling as hard as they can. And so what we see is not necessarily what you are feeling, and that is normal. You have to nurture self-compassion, and it means taking care of yourself the same way you would somebody else. It is preventing suffering by specific acts of kindness to yourself. And Glenda, that could be a cup of tea. That could be, I'm going to put on my favorite movie tonight. That could be a bubble bath. It could be a number of things, but beer does not count. Texas is leading the nation in drinking during COVID. So that's my safety message. Drinking doesn't count as self-compassion. We started self-compassion very early. This was something that we did naturally. We sucked our thumb, and it told our nervous system that we were okay. It allowed us to grow to a point where we developed self-confidence and we didn't need it anymore. And it made us tolerable to people around us. So pacifiers were invented as a way to help children deal with and learn that self-compassion. And I don't know how well you can see this slide. This is actually a picture of a fetus in utero at 21 weeks, and the fetus is sucking its thumb. So we began self-compassion very early. The problem is we lose it. Your next big nurturing of self-compassion, along with sucking your thumb, came with your mom and dad holding you and feeding you and making that eye contact with you, which is so important for brain development. And then it came with you sitting on their lap. But then around the age of 5 or 6, Glenda, all of a sudden, you had to relearn self-compassion, but you weren't allowed to suck your thumb because touch became different. You began to weigh 50 pounds and you got too big for our laps. So we told you to get off our laps. And suddenly, for most of us, it was literally one day, we simply weighed too much. And so we suddenly got stopped being held as much. Also, if you were a male child, you were not held as much as a female child. If you were a male child, because of society, we told you when you fell down to get up and knock it off and quit crying. And if you were a female child, we gave you a much different, kinder response. And the reality is that everybody needed that. But we had those big moments in time that changed our ability to see and do self-compassion for yourself. This kind of says how some caregivers feel. Some days this is me. This was me this morning, multiple times. I think it says it all. I do. And so As COVID started and I began to realize that I was having issues with self-compassion, I called my friend Amy, the therapist, and because she knew me, she told me to call Pam, the therapist. And Pam told me I had to get some self-compassion. And I have to tell you, I had no idea what she meant. And I said, sure, heck yeah, I'll get me some of that self-compassion. Where do I go to get that? And what do I do? And she said, well, it's really easy. You have to face your fear. And my fear felt like a bear in my face. But she said, and I told her my fear feels like a bear in my face. And she said, well, you have to face it, but in a kind and gentle way. And I didn't know how to do that with a bear in my face. So she sent me to Kristen Neff's website. And Dr. Neff is a professor at the University of Texas at Austin, and she owns the website self-compassion.org. Self-compassion.org. And Glenda, when you go on that page and scroll all the way down at the end, is a test that takes you about 5 minutes to take. And it tells you whether or not you are showing yourself self-compassion. And I thought, well, you know, I've been doing all this stuff that Pam told me to do, and I'm reading all these things, and I'm listening to all this stuff, so I'll be okay. And I took the self-compassion test, and what I found out was that I had failed it, that I did not show myself compassion at all. And so when I read her site, what I found was where she said, this moment that you're having right now is a moment of suffering, and suffering is part of life. And you have to learn to be kind to yourself in the moment. And may you give yourself that. May you be gentle with yourself. And the test is free. She is one of the gurus of self-compassion. And I encourage you to go there, because I believe that many of you will find out that you really aren't being compassionate to yourself. And it comes from the grief that you're going through. And just like depression and talking to the doctor about depression, we can also talk to the doctor about our need for self-compassion. So let's all take a deep breath. And now, Glenda, this is why they pay us the big bucks, because Glenda didn't know this was coming. So Glenda, tell me, and for those of you who are on the call, write down, because Glenda's going to tell me, if you're on the call, write down 2 things you would physically do to show support for a friend. And Glenda, I'm going to ask you, what are 2 things you would do to physically show support for me if you knew I was hurting?
Well, number one, I think I'm a good listener. And so I do offer that up and just sit there and listen.
So you'd sit next to me and just listen and be there.
Maybe even hold your hand if that's the kind of friends that we were, and just sit there and listen. And if you didn't say anything, that would be okay with me too. I would still listen. Listen to your breathing, look at your facial expressions, your body language, and get a sense of what would be the most help to you. I think the other thing, depending on the situation, is to invite someone out of their home, whether it's to go for a walk, to go out and sit in the backyard and look at the trees. You know me, and I've said this many times, nature is my healing. And so I would hope that that would be transferred to that other person, to be outside, to look at the trees, watch the squirrels, take a walk. Those would be the 2 things that I would think of right off the bat, since you didn't prepare me.
I'd give you a hug.
Oh, that too.
I'd give you a hug. I'd give you a hug full of love, a good, strong hug. I would. Now tell me, and for those of you who are listening, write down 3 kind and supportive things that you would say to a friend that's hurting. So Glenda, what are 3 kind and supportive things you would say to me as I grieve?
I think the one that I use the most is the one you brought up on your slide, is I'm so sorry for your loss. And that could, like you've explained so well, it could be all kinds of losses. It doesn't have to necessarily be the death of someone. It's hard to think of it when you're not in that
when it's just
situation.
thrown at you.
When it's just thrown at you.
I'm here for you. I always know
you.
that you're here for me.
That's
I know
right.
that personally as a friend, that you are here for me.
Yes.
And I know that you would tell me that.
And I think that I liked what you said in your slide. Don't wait. You don't have to ask, do something. I'm an action kind of a person. Figure out what it is and do it. It's always easier, as I say, to ask for forgiveness if you did the wrong thing, which is hard to imagine, but I guess it's possible, than not doing anything, just to be stagnant and not helping in some way.
Yeah, absolutely. And all of these are things that you and I can do that didn't cost money.
No.
And only took our time and truly gave us that human connection.
And Rosie,
everybody,
visit her friend and take them out for lunch and call. So she had some good feedback there too.
And then everybody complete these sentences. You give care. Why? My purpose is, Glenda, and this is my purpose. My purpose is to teach people about dementia. My passion is learning everything I can in order to be able to help the caregivers of people with dementia. And I persist because I'm stubborn and I believe I can make a difference.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
As I think about family caregivers, this is all true for you as well. It doesn't mean that your purpose is being a caregiver. That may not be your purpose in life. That may just be where you are right now. And it doesn't mean your passion is caregiving. Your passion may be going to the beach, but you persist. And why do you persist? Because that is powerful. Your purpose, your passion, and your persistence are all very, very powerful.
Yeah.
When I think about family caregivers, Glenda, I sat down and these were some of the words that I came up with: trustworthy, compassionate, accepting, human. You and I all the time run into people that are human and get upset because, oh, I did it wrong. You didn't do it wrong. You're human. You did the best you could at the time with what you knew. And now you know better and you do better. Honorable, fearless. I have seen family caregivers back a famous doctor up into a wall and chew him up one side and down the other. I thought, boy, that is fearless right there. Other people would run. Realizing that we're imperfect, wise. I have met caregivers with wisdom just dripping off of them, wanted to follow them around with a bucket. And has always remembered the key for where we are right now in self-compassion is, how would you treat a friend? And can you do that for yourself? So I'm going to teach you some compassionate things, Glenda. And this is what I want everybody to do. Okay, so no matter where you are, I want you to place your hands on your face as though you were holding the face of a young child. And just rest your hands there on your face. Your hands on your face tell your parasympathetic nervous system that it's okay, that it's going to be okay. It may be really, really frightening right now, but you're not going to fly apart. Your arms and legs aren't going to come off of you. You're not going to break into little pieces, but that you're going to be okay. And now, if you feel like it, put your hand over your heart. Putting your hand over your heart helps to tell your body that you're okay. And now put your hands over your stomach. To move from your heart to your stomach, putting your hands over your stomach says, I'm okay. And let me tell you why. The vagus nerve is the 8th cranial nerve, and it connects the brain to the heart, to the stomach, to upper and lower digestion. And that, Glenda, is why when you and I get upset or get whatever, Our brain goes nuts, our heart begins to pound, our blood pressure goes up, our pulse rises, our stomach begins to get nauseous and flip and flop, and then we have diarrhea, and it's because that entire line is connected. But if I start by telling myself it's okay, and I follow with it really is okay, and I follow down to my stomach with it really is okay, I'm using compassionate touch to naturally calm myself down. Another way to calm yourself down, and this is considered compassionate, is to lay down on the couch, on the bed, on the ground, on the floor. By simply changing where I'm looking visually, I will calm myself down. Glenda, rub your forearms. We are all not getting enough touch right now. Skin needs to be touched, even if it's our skin touching our skin. Rub your forearms and then hug yourself. So many of us are missing hugs. Hug yourself and dance like nobody's watching, which I'm not going to do for you right now because you all are watching and there's no need for that. This is actually a rare picture, Glenda, I caught of monsters practicing self-compassion.
Oh.
See how they've got their hands over their hearts? This is very rare to find. And I thought I was doing okay. I had brought my self-compassion score up from a 1 to a 3, thought I was doing good, but then came the variance. And so I called Pam, the therapist, and she said, well, she had added more stuff to her daily routine that she prepares as a therapist. So with the crush of COVID coming, she'd added more. So I thought, well, I'll add more too. So instead of meditating in the morning, I meditate in the morning and in the evening. It rewires my brain. It builds new connection. It protects me from aging. I increased my exercise. I begin to do a lot more exercise, and I do exercise even if it's just a few minutes. I actually moved the trash can into another room so that from the kitchen, I have to walk to this utility room to put the trash away because I thought even those 10 steps back and 10 steps forward will do that much more for me. And I try to be mindful when I'm outside. I try to focus on the tree, on the bark, on the leaf, on the vein on the leaf, on the flower, and I remember to do my breathing. And Glenda, for the last 9 weeks, I have been in conferences. I have been all over the United States. I think I've been in 12 different states in the last 2 months. And I have asked at every conference, how many of you are sleeping well? And how many of you are not sleeping? And for not sleeping, more than 3/4 of the group identifies that they are not sleeping. And you cannot have compassion for yourself if you're too exhausted to do something. So try sleep meditation. Try melatonin. For sleep meditation, I go to YouTube. I use the mindful movement, and I pick anything from a 1 hour to a 4-hour sleep meditation. It's called the mindful movement, and it's free. How can you beat that? Melatonin, not wine or alcohol. I had somebody actually call me yesterday and said, well, I'm drinking wine now at night to go to sleep and it's working, except I wake up at 3 in the morning and I'm awake for the rest of the night. And I said, well, that's because between 2 and 3 in the morning is when your brain processes the alcohol. That's why you're awake. Your brain doesn't like it. The wine is not actually helping you sleep. And she said, no, it is. It gets me to sleep. I said, okay, try it again. Between 2 and 3 in the morning, your brain is processing that wine, and that's what's waking you up. That's why you're not sleeping good. So that drink at night is not really helping us the way we can. So try melatonin, talk to your doctor, get sleep meditation, and see if those things don't help you, because without sleep, we don't age well. Get the tools to ignore the old critical you. So you have all kinds of meditation on YouTube, and it's free. Journal for yourself, especially through this journey. You will thank yourself later on when you look back and realize what you did, when you wrote down the funny things. It will be such a treasure for you. Use meditation coloring books. Those are really good to help you start meditation, Glenda, because you have to slow your breathing and your brain down to fill in every little tiny color that you have to fill in. One of the hardest things is throwing out the family dialogue. Glenda, a lot of families, it's not unusual for somebody in the family to give you this persona that might have been you when you were 7 or 15 or even 24, when your brain was still developing. And even though you're not that person anymore, they keep insisting that's who you are. And that's the critical dialogue you hear. Throw it away. It's not who you are. That person doesn't really know you, even if they're blood relatives. They don't really know you, and they're stuck on a you that all of us had an adolescent brain and did things we're not excited about. Get a therapist, do reality checks, take a walk, and listen to music. Glenda, music is so important, and the type of music you listen to can help you grieve or it can help you recover. I have a playlist that when I'm traveling to meet a family that I'm going to be dealing with somebody who is dying or who has just died, and I play that playlist, and the name of the playlist is Sweet. And a friend of mine got in the car and said, "Oh, I'm going to put on this playlist of Sweet." And as she put the playlist on, I thought, wonder how many songs she's going to make it through. And by the time we got to the third song, she's, "Can we turn this? This is really depressing me." Music can help us grieve. And sometimes I listen to that playlist, Sweet, because I need to grieve, because I am grieving the loss of a loved one, because I am grieving a loss. And so music can pick me up, it can pick you up, it can help us grieve, it can bring us down. So pay attention to your music and watch comedy. Oh my God, Glenda, everything on TV is murder and mayhem. Find comedy. When I have had it, I go to YouTube. I am ashamed to say I have watched Tim Conway do the elephant story on the Carol Burnett show so many times that they're probably going to send me a bill. It makes me laugh every time, but it helps me move forward. You have to realize this is not you. Nobody expects you to be perfect. We all make mistakes. Everybody thinks they're not good enough. You are loved, and you not only can't not do it, you are doing it. So self-compassion is mental and physical self. It's being kind to yourself versus judging yourself. It's the reality of who you are today versus those old messages. It's common humanity. It's being mindful. It's treating yourself the way you treat others. So do reality checks. I called my therapist at one point, Glenda, and I said, I sent a message, said, "Can you please call me back? Can you please call me back?" And she called me back in 10 minutes. And I said, "I'm okay. I don't need anything. I'm sorry. I should have sent you a message." And she said, "No, you called me. What's going on?" And I said, "Well, I thought I was having a bad day, but I just passed a man in a car being cut out with the jaws of life. So I'm okay. This thing that's overwhelming me right now, I've put it into a reality check. There, but for the grace of God goes I." And then, Glenda, so many times I've gotten through and my self-compassion has gotten better because I realize your daddy's term of "they can't eat you, get up and keep moving."
Yep.
So your assignment today, your holiday present to yourself, to everyone on the call, whether you are a professional caregiver or a family caregiver, is to write a letter to yourself. And Glenda, the letter must start, "Dear extraordinary and special, wonderful self." And you know what's funny about extraordinary, Glenda, is we say extraordinary and we begin to forget that that word means extraordinary. So dear extraordinary and special, wonderful self, and write a letter to yourself about the care you've given, about the profession you've chosen, about the education you did, about the diaper you changed today, about the package you delivered, about all the care you have given your loved one. That is your assignment, is to write that letter for yourself. And then that is your present to yourself, is to read that letter when you finish writing it. So thank you all for being who you are. Thank you for the kindness you've shown yourself. Thank you. Some of you have given up your careers to take care of someone. Some of you have made your careers taking care of someone. Thank you for stepping up. Thank you for being there. Know that what you do matters to everyone. It matters to your loved one. It matters to the people around you. Those of you who've stepped up to the plate, you have taught your children, this is how you take care of me if something catastrophic happens. Your siblings who haven't stepped up to the plate, remember, they can be in denial, which is part of grief, which is part of loss. But they're also teaching their children how to take care of them if something happens. So you don't need to worry about them. God will get them. Right, Glenda?
Yes, that's what we say.
And one more thing. I love this picture. This is what all of you on this line today do for others. Now go do it for yourself. So go to self-compassion.org, take the test, and then do what Dr. Neff says to do on her website and take care of yourself. Okay, Glenda, I told you I'm going to depress everybody, but it'll be okay at the end.
Right. And so I know that you have something coming up after this, and we're at 12:03 Central Time. Do you have time for a couple of questions?
Oh, yeah, I do. I'm good until 2 o'clock Central Time.
Oh, yay.
As far as I know, I'm good.
As
far as I know.
So does anybody have a question or a comment that they would like to make? If so, unmute your phone. If you dialed in, and Melody, that's you, you can press *6 and your phone will be unmuted. Others of you on Zoom, if you unmute your speaker, I can see that also, and I will call on you by name. Anyone have a question or a comment?
Well, that makes you feel good.
Well, I understand it. I mean, you know, we talked about a lot of things, and we are getting some good feedback, and so I appreciate that. I did ask a question on the chat box. If you have any dementia-related topic that you would like to hear Tam cover next year, because we are approaching next year. This is our last session for this year. She'd be happy to hear from you. Joanne, did you have a question or a comment?
Yeah, I'm in Oxford, Mississippi, and I'm just delighted to hear this. I may have gotten in late and didn't know exactly what your background is, Tam, but it sounds like you've been working with dementia-related caregivers, which I've been doing. I started an Alzheimer's caregiver support group in 1985.
Wow.
Monthly, and now I'm doing it on Zoom after 37 years. So I could relate so much to what you're saying, and just wonder, it was very powerful, and wish I was as skilled as you are in saying some of these things. But do you have any advice? And do you run support groups or do individual counseling, or what's your background?
I'm a gerontologist, and I'm a national speaker on dementia and an author.
Yeah, I'm a retired gerontologist too, but so that's something I would really like to chat with you some more about. I think there's a lot of topics that would be wonderful.
Oh, okay. Yeah, no.
I'm not sure what's going on there. Joanne, thank you. And watch in your area. She's getting all over the country these days. Just spent several weeks in Florida speaking. So, you know, she's around.
I would love to connect with you. Thank you.
Thank you. Regina, did you have something that you would like to share? Regina?
No.
Okay, you just accidentally unmuted your phone.
Okay.
All right, thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
I'd like to point out Baylor's going to the Sugar Bowl. That's
oh my
like
gosh.
To point that out.
Her alma mater. Yeah, she's brazen about that. So
I'm sorry to say that you're playing Ole Miss. We're Oxford, so good luck.
We're not worried about it at all.
Yeah, should be a good game, but glad to know. Yeah.
Well,
I'm from Arkansas, so I have a real fondness for Texans, but actually.
Yeah.
So.
Well, it's just football, and Tam and I had a very heated conversation about football this morning and the results of football, you know, injuries, head injuries in specific. Anyone else have a question or a comment? The caregiver teleconnection calendar will be out later this week. Tam is going to tell Minerva what she wants to talk about the first thing in January, what we're going to cover. That's your reminder, Miss Tam.
I figured that was. So is everybody doing okay? Everybody feel good going into the holidays? Because they are so stressful and they really, really bring grief out. So everybody okay, or do you need to chat?
Linda, I have a question if there's time.
Yes.
And
Yes, go ahead.
this is Melody. I'm in a public place and it's very noisy here, so I apologize in advance. Thank you, Dr. Cummings, again. My anxiety, I find on many things, is going up, including the uptick in COVID cases. This is sort of a related question. My line in the sand has been to not let my spouse, who has dementia, be around people who are unvaccinated. He has a son who is unvaccinated, and I'm sticking with that plan. Although at the very end, I will certainly lift that and let my husband's son come into the house. We can meet outside, but not in the house. What is your thought as we approach the holidays in terms of the uptick in COVID cases and at the end of life?
You can be my caregiver anytime you want. You are doing the exact correct thing. The mortality rate in people with dementia is extraordinary. So it's not like he would be coming to visit me and I've had both vaccines and my booster shot. Their mortality rate is different than normal aging people. So you are doing the best you can to protect your husband, and I agree with you.
Thank you.
You go get them, girl.
That's
And
right.
you know, one more time, those of you that simply can't take family coming, it's okay. Email them. Tell them that because of the rise in cases, you don't need visitors this year. You'll do it next year. You'll do it when the springtime comes, when it gets better. It is okay to say, I can't do it. You can't come this year. And blame it on COVID. Blame it on me. Say the doctor said you don't have to have visitors this year. Because for a lot of you, it means doing a whole lot more work. Even though they intend good intentions, even though they mean the best, even though there's a lot of love there, do a Zoom call, do a FaceTime, do a whatever. But if you need to not have visitors this year, it's okay to say that. It's okay to say no. Remember, they're your children and they're afraid of you.
I think that's
Okay.
self-compassion. Being able
That
to
is
say
definitely, that is definitely self-compassion.
no. Exactly. Thank you for that, Melody. Anybody else? We're kind of winding down here. Anybody else have a question or a comment before we sign off for the year? Oh my goodness.
Wow.
I know. Okay, I don't see any phones or speakers unmuted, Tam. So happy holidays.
Happy holidays.
Christmas to you, and everybody, please be kind to yourself. Daphne, I'm sorry for your loss in August, your husband. Please, everybody, take care of yourself. You can't take care of somebody else if you don't take care of yourself. Is that right,
And
Dr.
Daphne, you don't have to do the holidays the way you've always done them. If you decide this year you want to lay in bed and read a book all day, that's okay. You get to do whatever you want to do. The first Christmas without our loved one is especially difficult. So do self-compassion.
That's
Do
right.
what you would do for a friend.
That's right.
Okay.
We call that a white trash day here in Texas. You just sit back and do whatever it is that you would like to do, wearing your robe, your slippers, if that's what comforts you. Watching some of those funny Christmas movies. Yeah, just be kind to yourself. All right, everyone, it's been my pleasure to be with you and to be with Tam today. We certainly hope to see you or talk to you in the new year. Have a blessed holiday season and be kind to yourself. Bye-bye.
Take
You
care,
do the
everyone.
same, Glenda. Thank you.
Thank you,
Bye,
Melanie.
everyone. Take
Bye-bye.
care, everyone.
Bye. Okay. Thank you.
Bye-bye.